Today I want to tell you, particularly the young people, so that there's no mistake here, so long as there is a United States of America, atem lo lavad. You are not alone.
That was Barack Obama speaking in Israel to an audience of students yesterday, his first such visit. Now, the president said some things that one would think that the Israeli audience might like to hear, but they were laden with a couple caveats. We're going to bring in Luke Coffey now. He's a fellow from the Heritage Foundation. He's been watching this sort of politics for many years to give us his take on this. Luke, what's your initial reaction to Obama's speech?
Well, President Obama went to Israel with the mission of trying to improve his image in that country and to improve America's relationship with Israel. As many know, this is the first trip to Israel that he made as President of the United States. I think most people would find that shocking here in America, and I think most people found that disappointing in Israel. So when he went to Israel, he had to try to reset relations with President Netanyahu, and he also had to try to re-engage with the Israeli population. So I think that was probably the main focus of his trip, and it'll remain to be seen if he was successful in that or not.
Luke, it seemed like he almost was over-effusive in his praise and his acknowledgement for Israel and the right to exist and the right to defend themselves in ways that you'd almost think he might be doing just to justify the fact that he hasn't spoken to them for 4 years. Do you think that there's anything else lurking underneath it? There's going to be some conditions, some caveats that people are going to think, oh, this wasn't so much of a happy meeting as we first thought?
Well, he definitely had a lot of ground to make up for, and you're absolutely right. I mean, a lot of what he said was for public consumption. He looked very eager to say it, and he looked like he was almost ashamed that he had to wait so long to say these things at this point in time, when he should have been saying these things about Israel and the American-Israeli relationship for the last 4 years throughout his first presidency. You know, we saw a lot of backslapping between President Netanyahu and President Obama. We saw President Obama we saw him well received in front of the students when he gave a speech. But what happened behind closed doors between the two presidents, I seriously doubt it was as rosy as they wanted to lead us on to believe. I suspect that it was a pretty tense time, that Netanyahu and President Obama were probably very frank with one another, and because the relationship between the two has not been rosy and it has not been good, and we cannot pretend that a relationship that has been at best on the rocks for the last 4 years is all of a sudden going to be fixed simply because President Obama finally decides to visit one of America's closest allies.
Now, Luke, he said Iran, they're not getting any nukes. There was a lot of applause after he said that. That may have upset some people on the left in the States who perhaps they had been pleased that Obama had not been going to Israel to say the words that he had been saying to them. Do you think he's really going to follow through on that? And because of just how much it really seems very, very foreign policy hawkish, do you think it was even a sincere approach?
Well, actually, this is one thing that President Obama has been very consistent on. He was consistent on this point with Iran not getting a nuclear weapon in his first term. He was consistent on this point during the presidential campaigning, and he's still consistent with it today. He has made very clear, and members of his administration have made it very clear, that Iran will not get a nuclear weapon, and that containment is not a strategy, it's prevention that's the strategy. But what President Obama has failed to do is explain, what does this actually mean? What does it mean that Iran is not going to get a nuclear weapon? What is America and America's allies willing to do to make sure that doesn't happen? Because it seems to me that every single day we get closer and closer to an Iranian nuclear bomb. There doesn't seem to be much being done to prevent it that we can see. And it almost seems inevitable at this point that eventually they will get a nuclear bomb. So if President Obama is so clear that this is not going to happen, and he's going to do everything that in his power to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, then those are some pretty big words, and he better be able to back those up.
Well, let me flip that back to you then and ask your advice in that, in an ideal world, what exactly would that mean? What exact actions would back that up?
Well, we need to continue on with the sanctions and strengthen the economic sanctions on Iran. We need to consider, pursuing the diplomatic route. But at the end of the day, we have to make it very clear to the leaders of Iran that the military option is on the table. And at the end of the day, if it comes down to an Israeli strike on the Iranian nuclear facility or an American-led strike on the Iranian nuclear facility, while both of them aren't necessarily good things to do, it's best that the Americans do it and not the Israelis.
Do you think we're going to see a continued strengthening of relationship here, or is this Obama trying to do a really, really big event so he could say, all right, you got your speech, didn't have it last term, this term, there you go? Or is this, like you said, continuing with consistency and he's put the line in the sand to forge the relationship?
Now, well, the American-Israeli relationship is historically so important that I think at the end of the day, the leaders of these two countries understand that they have to work together. But as with all relationships in life, it takes hard work. It takes commitment, it takes determination, and sometimes it takes compromise. And I don't see this happening. I don't see 4 years of poor personal relations between the two being wiped clean overnight simply because President Obama pays a visit to Israel. As I said, this was his first time visiting Israel as president. He should have visited Israel a long time ago. Netanyahu knows what the score is. He knows that what Obama's feelings are towards him. And, you know, in front of the cameras, in front of the public, they have to put on a united face. But behind closed doors, I suspect it's not as rosy. Now, has it improved because of this trip? It probably has. But does that mean that it's back to normal or back to where it should be between the U.S. and President Obama and Netanyahu? No, I don't think it is.
Luke, do you think the elements of Obama's base who are not particularly crazy about Israel, do you think they're going to accept this speech for face value and understand, all right, that's where the president's going, I respect that? Or are they going to start to lean on him to actually stop doing this sort of stuff?
Well, this is when President Obama needs to remember that he's the president of the United States and he's not just campaigning for the Democratic vote in America. He needs to do what's best in the national interests and not necessarily what's best in his party's interests. And right now, in the U.S. national interests, the best thing is for a strong relationship with Israel and to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. I don't think people understand the consequences of what would occur if Iran did get a nuclear weapon. It would spark an arms race in one of the most unstable parts of the world. It would rip into shreds the Non-Proliferation Treaty. That would become meaningless. There are huge consequences here, and I think everyone needs to wake up to this and understand.
That's interesting stuff, Luke Coffey. Thanks very much for joining us. That was Luke from the fellow.
Thank you.
He's a fellow for the Heritage Foundation. Well, folks, send me your thoughts on this and more. You can follow me on Twitter at Anthony Furey. There's still more coming up. Stick around.